Hey there, Mustangs. It's me, Miss Renaud, and I'm excited to be your guest reader for One Book, One School. And I know you're reading this book, Nuts to You. And I've been keeping up, and I'm pretty excited to be able to read chapters 17 and 18 to you today. So, oh, and in special honor, I wore my little squirrel pen. All right, let me put on my glasses so I can read it. And here we go with chapter 17, Bobcats Happen. Afternoon darkened into evening. The air grew colder. It grew mean and spiteful, gathering its forces and hurling drops, slushy flakes, and icy pellets at Chai. He turned his back to the winds and rubbed his face. Night was falling. He could not keep going, especially in this weather. He was tired. He was cranky. He was forgetting to be careful. He made his way to the ground in the way that you might make your way from the living room to your bedroom. He dragged leaves and bits of brush into a lazy heap in the way you might arrange the covers you left in such a mess this morning. This is fine for you. There are probably no bobcats lurking in the bathroom, waiting to pounce on you as you walk by. The bobcat may have been tired and cranky too. Maybe that's why he carelessly snapped a twig as he moved closer to the tasty snack that had suddenly come into view. Chai's fur stood on end. He sniffed the air. He felt the presence of the big cat. Fear gave him one last burst of energy, and he took off, his paws barely meeting the ground. Aware of nothing but the need to hide, he frantically scanned the murkiness ahead. Was that a crevice? It was! Hallelujah! In he went. It was narrow, not too deep, but deep enough. Deeper than the length of a bobcat's arm. He flattened his back against the wall and pulled in his gut. Almost immediately, bobcat claws reached in, exploring. Chai felt the pointy tips graze his fur hairs, but he did not move. He did not breathe or make one sound. The bobcat withdrew his paw and sniffed at the opening of the crevice. Satisfied that the snack was still in there, the bobcat lay down. The fact that the crevice was in the entry to a small cave was a piece of good luck for him. Sheltered from the storm, he settled in. There was a little empty place in his stomach that he wouldn't mind filling, but he wasn't in a hurry. He would wait. His eyes sucked in the last shred of light the stormy evening had to offer and reflected them back out into the darkness. They appeared to Chai as faint yellow spheres within the large black bobcat shape. It was hard for him to separate the bobcat from the general darkness, except that the cat was darker and closer and warmer. He could smell its scent. He could feel its warm breath waft over him in waves when the bobcat exhaled. It was an odd feeling to be somewhat grateful for that warmth on this bone-chilling night, knowing all the while that if he emerged even slightly from his crevice, the warmth would envelop him and become even warmer in a moist, painful, fatal way. The thought gave him pause, or rather, pause, P-A-W-S. He smiled weakly at his little joke. The situation was not funny, though. In the chill between bobcat breaths, Chai shuddered. He looked out at the yellow eyes and the black shape. He felt the warm breath. He was hungrier than the bobcat was. He was on the verge of fainting from hunger. mixed with terror. At a time, he slumped, not so much falling asleep as collapsing. It was as if his body said, "If this is the end, I'd rather not know about it." Still pressed against the wall, the bottom parts of him slid out of the way from it just a little, within reach of the bobcat, although he wasn't paying attention just then. Now here's a note from the author. Maybe you have heard the expression, between a rock and a hard place. Now you know what it means. The hard place in this situation was the bobcat. All right, we're getting ready now for chapter 18, and the author has a couple discussion questions for you. So the discussion topic is, a sleeping bobcat cute? Why or why not? And then a second question also, does ZZZZZZZ really sound like snoring? If not, what letters would be better? Feel free to pause the video and take a moment to discuss these two questions. All right, welcome back. Now, let's move on to chapter 18, Something Was Different. For hours, the storm blustered and banged outside the trees where Jed and Chaka slept. The very same storm slammed and rollicked around the cave where Chai had collapsed in the cold crevice. It howled and pelted, whirled and whined. It spit and sprayed and showered. Its winds were fierce. Its wetness was inescapable. Every living thing caught out in the icy fury curled in on itself, shivered, shriveled, shrank. And then, while everyone's eyes were squeezed shut, the storm rattled and whimpered and spun its way to somewhere else. The air stilled. The stars emerged. In the crevice, Chai opened his eyes and blinked. He sensed that something was different. Something had changed. He realized that the bottom of him had slid within reach of the bobcat's claws. Stealthily, moving one paw at a time, he worked his way back up to a standing position. The rock wall behind him was wicked cold. Not the sort of thing you wanted to nestle up to, given the choice. But nestle up he did. By the time he was on his feet again, his eyes had adjusted to the darkness. And Chai noticed two things. One was the darkness wasn't so dark. The form of the bobcat was edged by moonlight. He could make out, easily, the peaceful rising and falling of the bobcat's furry ribs. Also, the noise of the storm had subsided. He could still hear the sound of moving air, but now the air was moving in and out of the bobcat's nose. The bobcat was snoring, which meant the bobcat was asleep. Since bobcats are creatures who hunt by night, he knew that the bobcat was just napping. So it might be now or never. Chai saw that. Still, to run toward the mouth and claws of a bobcat went against everything that was in him. He moved closer, paused, and listened. Should he go on? He waited for the next snore. And waited. And waited. Chai glanced back to see how far he had come from the relative safety of the wall. As he did, the snore came, a loud, ripping one, and he jumped. There was a halt in the middle of the snore, and he froze. Then the rest of the snore, a soft, trailing, farting wheeze. Fear left him. He stepped out of the crevice and he padded right up to the sleeping beast and stood up. He looked it over. He had never seen one this close before. He thumbed his nose at the bobcat. He put his thumbs in his ears and lifted his tail and mooned the big animal. Mooning in the moonlight. Then he stepped softly toward the nearest tree and scurried up and away. Not because he was afraid, but because he was not a fool. Bobcats, of course, climb trees too. They are excellent climbers. But sleeping bobcats don't. This bobcat was only napping, and momentarily he opened his eyes and blinked. He sensed that something was different. Something had changed. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed chapters 17 and 18 of Nuts to You, and I can't wait to find out what's going to happen next. Thanks for having me as your guest reader.